Has Ahmet come? Yes, welcome to everyone, to all of you, to the Geography of Thought, to A4 program. Today, again, we are continuing to talk about philosophy of history. 1 month ago, at the end of September, we had done our last program. Today, we are having our second meeting. Normally, Ali Aydin would have been accompanying me, but he's fallen victim to the COVID pandemic as a whole family, and we wish them speedy recovery. Welcome, Professor Şahin Uçar. Welcome back, and send my good wishes to Mr. Ali for his speedy recovery. In our last program, you have, in a highly abstract way, you have given us an analysis and interpretation about the philosophy of history. History, the historian, and the limitations of human species. You've made some clear observations about these topics. As a result, we cannot we cannot understand the past as it was before. Like, it was a very convincing program, and your books and your conferences and speeches have been confirming these thoughts. And in that sense, today, within all these limitations of history, historian, and the human species, and our channels of communication with the outside world, and the channels, since we cannot go beyond these channels of communication, and the life that we live, the past, the present, and the future, in order to understand this, since we cannot give up this quest for understanding, within all these limitations, we are obliged to act, obviously, in some way. Within all these limitations and these paradoxes, these conundrums. So, how did Şahin Uçar dedicate his life to philosophy of history? Why did he dedicate it? And a little bit, and also, how do we read the present and the future? We're going to be talking about that in our program today. So, there's a situation like this. We historians, I don't know if it has been so popular in the past, but in today's world it is extremely popular. Well, there are ideological reasons for that, yes, but the matters that we're talking about, the nature, to what extent are we having a discussion about things that we're living through? It's obvious from the way we live, and and therefore these programs that we have, the nature of this connection will be eliminated thanks to this program. I hope that it will eliminate those aspects. Therefore, it is a important 1.5 hour meeting. Without further ado, I would like to with the heading of today and tomorrow, with from the perspective of Şahin Uçar. So, from where we had left off from our last program, you're going to be looking at your interpretation. Go ahead, please, Professor. So, as I have indicated in my previous speeches, as I have indicated before, first of all, human consciousness and abilities, the spirit of humans have a limitation, and the history itself has a limitation. I've told about it, if you remember. Like, there are those the events themselves that have stayed in the past, that have remained in the past, and there's the narrative that the historians build on them, like that they imagine on top of them. So this is some art, some like, depends on the historian to the extent of how much they can achieve this. And then there's a real nature of this documentary aspect of this remnants, right? And in the interpretation of history, whether it's in us or in some other ideological interpretations, apart from some great historians, most historians have some basic, simple, and not very logical, not very reasonable comments. Are we going to consider them philosophy of history too? And then there's philosophy of history speculations, but they are they too have a lot of drawbacks and a lot of problems. Apart from all this capacity limitation, there's also the human wills. Their influence has some limitation. The effects of human activity. So in the way that all humans have individual problems. So my problems, for example, I have some problems with being like loneliness and some other problems. It's individual to me. You cannot change that by bringing about some laws on a government level. You cannot solve individuals' problems. So the world's and humanity's problems are global problems, and even states cannot find a solution for these things. Turkey can solve its own problems, internal problems perhaps, but the world's global problems, there are some global problems of humanity today, some global scale problems, and how are they going to solve that? So humans' own personal problems or family problems cannot be solved, whereas they cannot be solved. How can it have an effect on global effects, global matters? So like in democracy and so on, there's like the voting and like to solve the problems, but by choosing a representative, you're not solving the problems of the country. And even if you solve the country's problems, it doesn't mean solving the problems of the world. The problem is that today the humanity's most important problems matters, and these are life and death matters. These huge problems that pose life and death issues are global level, and individual governments cannot solve these problems, and doesn't matter how big a state it is. Within its own borders it has an effect perhaps, but it doesn't have enough. Like United States might want to, or China might want to rule the world, but it cannot do that alone on its own. Every country has its own, every government state has its own policies. So the mental limitations of humans, like our activities. So how much effect can I have, in influence can I have in the world? I can't even have influence over my children. I can't even solve my own problems, let alone Turkey's problems. And so what I'm trying to say is that the activities of human and its role in history, what is this role? How much can we influence events? Tolstoy has explained it in War and Peace. Like Napoleon wanted, just because Napoleon wanted, did people like 500,000 people go from Paris to Moscow? This is absurd. That this exaggeration of the role of the heroes in history is absurd. So he has arguments of his own and his own philosophy of history, and in the end of War and Peace there's like a 40-50 page of a discussion at the end of the book. And these old like Cebriye Multisene Sunni schools and other schools of theology that has been like are people doing their own actions, like behind their own actions, or are they do they have free will, or is there like fate? So there's like and there's also like social fate, right? So your question is such a question that from the perspective of Şahin Uçar, like the past, the present, and the future. But what do you mean by what how can we understand the present and the future? Is it Turkey's or mine or a group's future and present, or for example a political party, or is it on a national level like Turkey's problems? Is it Turkish Republic's problems like present and future, or it can be discussed in this way? Or if you say, for example, Turkish people, it means beyond the Turkish Republic, like there are the Azeris, the Kazakhs, and the Turkish world, like from Adriatic to the Chinese coast. There's a large geography of Turkic tribes. So if you say Turkish people, it means beyond the Turkish Republic. If you say Islam society, Islamic civilization or society, it's like beyond. If you say humanity's problems, it's like all of it. So I don't want to talk much about Turkey's problems, but let me briefly tell you about it, like from the perspective of the Turkish history. So Turks from the Göktürk writings is like an ancient tribe that has played an important role in history. They have created a lot of established a lot of governments and empires. It has a rich history. It's got a rich literature. So about 1,000 years ago, they have become Muslims from the Asian steppes, Middle Asian steppes. It has brought Turkish people into another civilization's sphere of influence. It's a big change from the perspective of the Turkish tribes. And then there were the Selçuklus and the Ottomans and the great Selçuks, the Anatolian Selçuks, the Osmans, who can be counted as a continuation of the Selçuklus. And after a 600 year of Ottoman rule, along with the other empires in World War I, the Ottoman Empire has collapsed. But in the Reformation era, they have been influenced by the changes in the developments in the West, and because of their scientific and technological developments, in order not to stay behind, they tried to do some reformations to become westernized. To become a more industrial, well, maybe they haven't dreamed to become a more advanced industrial civilization, but they have tried in their own way. They made an effort to open some schools and some kind of like educational reforms. And there's like this historical fate, like there was the World War One, yeah, and the Ottomans were successful in that war. Yes, they were, but we, along with the Germans, we have lost the war, and there was an Istiklal War when Anatolian was invaded. So there were these officers like Fevzi Çakmak, Mustafa Kemal, and İsmet İnönü. They when they saw that the empire age was over, and when the empires had collapsed. And even and almost even the British Empire had collapsed, and they established a republic. And in establishing this republic, they after the revolution, French Revolution, like this cultural atmosphere, it was influenced with the Enlightenment ancestors. So they were influenced by these ancestors of theirs who were influenced by the French culture, French Revolution, and they kind of like established this Enlightenment influenced government, and they took these reforms to a much larger scale. And there was a fight about this. There were people who were more conservative who resisted this, and then there was those modernizers. Between them, there was a fight, and the modern republic was in a conundrum like this, and despite everything, İsmet İnönü, when he was the president in 1950. He is without any problems has conveyed it to the Democratic Party, has stepped down. A different mentality, a more conservative mentality has come into power. These are not so simple matters as to make such wide generalizations, but I'm making some rough sketches. And since then, since the establishment of this Democratic Party, it has been in a multi-party regime. And today we have this 20-year 20-year rule, and things seem to be going very bad, and the end of this political regime seems to have come to an end. And no matter how the next generation of politicians come, like under no circumstances it would take at least 10-15 years of restoration under these circumstances, and it doesn't seem very easy, and there are some problems that cannot be resolved regardless of what party is going to come. So like I don't like the opposition nor the current government, and I have told them into their own, I have told it to them face to face too. I've told them personally to them that they are doing it wrong, that they are by creating this party. Like, let me not go into the details of it, but as a result, as I've told in Mülk and Hilafet in my book, right, Caliphate, you can take a look at that book. As I've said it, as I've said it, this modernization or westernization or the Islamicization, these both inclinations are both dreamy, wishy-washy, wishful, right? This modernization tendency is a bit more correct, but because it has been able to withstand against 100 years of change, and it's a very long amount of time if you think about it for a state. So Ottoman Empire has lasted for 600 years, but the Republic has almost been 100 years now. So for its own period, it is very consistent and rational. Toynbee identifies this as a Heroldian end. So like, talk about the conservatives, like political Islamists and the Westerners. So like political Islamists and the Westerners. Arnold Toynbee has distinguished them. There is no Islamic political Islamic implementation in history as the Islamists think. The historians have a completely wrong interpretation of it, whether it's the Westerners or the Easterners. They misunderstand these issues. As you know, I've studied Islam history in the Emevi periods. There hasn't been, as they dream, as they think. It's like a government has three foundations of execution, and implementation, and election, like the parliament, whatever. I couldn't translate them. And the judgment, the system of judgment, right? So if these have not been established, if these institutions have not been established, we cannot talk about a fully fledged state. From these three aspects, like, there hasn't been a state that has been fully fledged in the history. So Islamists are seeing a dream. They are dreaming. There was a caliphate, but it was more of a kind of like a it was more like a sultanate. It was rather than a caliphate, and four of the caliphs were killed. Okay, let's skip Abu Bakr's poisoning, but at least three of them has been politically assassinated. So the caliphate was not successful either, and the Prophet's Prophet's rule cannot be considered an institutionalized government. So the Islamic State has emerged in the Emevi period, but it hasn't lasted long. But so you cannot copy something that hasn't existed. And the Westerners, Westernists also is like dreamy. Like today's Europe is so. At least it's like something that exists. 100 years passed, and a lot of things have changed. And today's Europe and the French Revolution has a lot of differences. Like the Europe of the French Revolution has got great differences. Now humans may not realize that, even humanity may not realize that. Turkey is not aware of that, but there are, even to this day, there are these like national states and other ideologies exist and prevail over the world because of the French Revolution. So when we say today and tomorrow, Abdul Baki is speaking. Oh, okay, Şahin Uçar is speaking again. The point is that 100 years ago, Atatürk and his friends, Kuvayi Milliye and Reformation, like the French Revolution and the Enlightenment ideas, are also obsolete, completely out of fashion, and even harmful ideas. Even more, I have some radical thoughts as a philosopher, and in many topics, not just all the people in Turkey, but perhaps from all the people in the world. So, as if looking at it from the space, like these global matters and so on, no state, not even if all humanity tries to collaborate, it seems to me that it's questionable that they will be able to solve these problems. I'm trying to say that the humanity has some limitations too. Like, for example, property. It has been going on for 10,000 years. Should it continue? State, in whatever form it may have, like the democracy, monarchy, theocracy, or whatever, like this institution of the state, is it a good institution? Should it continue? If not, why shouldn't it? But these kind of things cannot be solved by humans. You can think about it theoretically, but let alone an individual. Not an individual, let alone a state, cannot solve these problems. For example, the climate problem. The world's climate has changed. It's been broken, and it will get much worse in the next 10-15 years. And we must immediately the only way to stop that is to immediately stop all the production and the digging up of the fossil fuels. Even today, it's too late, and we have started seeing the effects of it. And there are some very bad indicators about how bad it's getting. So can Turkey solve the problem of the climate change? Can Russia? Can other companies? It can, like we talk about Paris agreements and other agreements, but can humanity solve this problem? Like, there are such big problems like the climate change and ecological disbalances. There are such great problems like the AI coming and changing everything. So these things cannot be solved individually by people or by states. And even humanity can. It seems very questionable that even humanity cannot solve this problem. Like, it seems questionable that they can solve it. And so from the Turkey's own history, there's like this, became Muslim, created some empires, tried to westernize, and it turned into a republic and continues today. But as you know, in Turkey there are some ideological conflicts. So there are Republicans and conservatives. We can call them like political Islamists, as some people call them. Pejoratively, not all of them are political Islamists, but there's such a conflict, and this doesn't seem to be resolving. Like, just because another party or another political rule is gonna come, it's not gonna change. What kind of orientation should we put instead of it? So Turkey's problems are gonna be very political, and I don't want to talk about this because I don't want to say such bad things, and because I have some radical thoughts, regardless of whether it's from the perspective of the right or the left, because my thoughts are gonna be foreign to both parties. So I'm gonna leave these topics aside. we need to take it globally. Like the problems of today and the future needs to be taken from a global perspective. So and like looking at it from a space, we can talk about the most important aspects of the problems instead of local problems.
Türkiye'nin yani ortaya çıkan fikir akımlarının, siyasi
The
hareketlerin
political
yanlış oryantasyon biçimleri
movements
olduğunu siz zaten
are in
belirtiyorsunuz.
Turkey are
Dolayısıyla
wrong
belki
orientations,
onların
as you
için yanlış
talk about.
oryantasyon biçimleri
So
olduğuna
why should
ilişkin
we consider
müstakil bir
them?
program da yapılabilir.
Like we should have a separate program about why they are wrong orientations.
Var, evet.
I have a book about property, like mulk and caliphate, and I've said that before in that book. So I want to essentially say that I don't think that this is very correct to enter into a discussion of that, because they are not resolvable problems that people think. Like, it's not easily resolvable. People don't understand. They are okay. They don't know about it, so they are exempt from it. But even the intellectuals and the educated people are thinking of these matters as if they are cogent, easily resolvable matters, which is a mistake. When I look at their discussions, they are very narrow, shallow, and some kind of like unqualified, and there's some kind of like a generally unqualified discussion going on, and most of all the politicians are the least qualified, and these discussions are very narrow and base, and it's not so black and white as they think, as they assume. So both of those orientations are wrong, and an intellectual who's got the capacity to put forward a new orientation doesn't exist in Turkey. So I'll express those things when the time comes, but as I said, like a history, the sieve of history that passes through the global, so like a global scale sieve of history. It's like I'll try to express that. You mentioned that we need to kind of like find a orientation. It's our responsibility. Yes, that's true, but this cannot be done by it's a very narrow expertise in a certain this or that area. That's why I'm inclined towards philosophy of history. I see philosophy of history as a holistic consciousness, a uniting discipline, not just about philosophy or history. It all includes theology, mystic experiences, history, art, religion, philosophy, and like something that collects all of these things together, that's uniting, cohesive, a holistic understanding that combines all the perspectives of these different sciences, and as a result, because of the increase of the perspective, it's an advantageous field of study which puts all of these disciplines together. That's why I chosen philosophy of history. That's why because the intellectuals and because the reason why they can't see it is because of this narrow vision and perspective. So it's not so simple, right? It's like this is because of that, or that's because of that. It's not like so easy. So if we go into details, we can talk about that later as well. But there's no point in discussing things that are of no value. I prefer to talk about my own views here about not just the Turks, not just Muslims, but of all humans today and tomorrow, like the past and future of all humanity. So because our problems today are of global scale, and we cannot solve these problems using local solutions. Even if it's effective, it's going to be local. It's not going to have any global effects. That's why it's not going to be effective. And the pandemic that we have seen has been a proof of that. if it could have been done globally, like if precautions could have been taken, if solutions could have been applied globally, it could have been solved. But Africa continues to deal with these problems, and people from Africa will continue coming over, for example, right? And the problem will continue. It requires global scale cooperation, but has humanity been able to cooperate together? Vaccines are, could they say vaccines are free, we're going to give it without any money, like we are giving it to everyone, to poor poverties and everyone? Could they say like we're going to distribute it all to everyone? Because of the problem of property, they couldn't do such things. What are they called? Like the firm that has the intellectual property or property rights of these vaccines, they sell it for a certain price to those who have the money to pay for it. And it's a global problem. How are you going to sell it? How are you going to solve it? As we have seen in this pandemics, even though this is related with the life of humans, and as even though many people have died, regardless of whether they're poor or rich, like death is the same for everyone, as you know, even though it's so dangerous, or perhaps even going to be worse in the future, perhaps. Despite this, humans have not been able to collaborate, and this is a global problem. It's pandemic, as it's called, like it's global. It's all throughout the world. And against this pandemic, the local governments have tried to solve their governments have tried to solve this locally, but they couldn't. They cannot unless there is global cooperation. So what I'm trying to say is that these problems that we have, like global problems that we have, and the most important among these is civilization. Like the concept that we call civilization and all of its institutions, according to me, are obsolete. They are some hurdles that come from the past. They are hindrances. And it includes the property, family, the state, and everything. It's like a very radical, sharp criticism, if I'm correct. So, like, I don't know if I'm right or not. That's what I want to discuss by talk about the past and the future of humanity.
Devam edelim çünkü çok önemli bir noktaya geldik.
Let's continue from there, I think, because we've come to an important point.
Bir iklim problemi var.
So there's this climate problem, right? It's such a problem that is so urgent that, for example, even though most people are not aware of it, like the ice caps are melting, everyone knows that, but in those ice caps there are, from ancient times, from like millions, from all times, there can be some new pandemics and new viruses as they melt, which have been kept in those ice caps. Those tundras, those frozen lands have billions of tons of methane frozen under that land. And if it comes down to 0 degrees, if the tundras evaporate, like if they melt away, if they billions of tons of methane gas can be released into the atmosphere, and nobody can take any kind of find any kind of solutions to such a problem if that kind of thing happens. And today the fossil fuels and all these wastes, the atmosphere is being changing, and it's increasing. In the climate it's warming, and it's accepted by the scientists and the governments, and like they've tried to come up with some agreements, like the Paris Agreement, like Turkey is going to accept it or not accept it, etc. But like, can we make some kind of precautions for it on a global scale? We should immediately start this wind turbines, solar panels, and we haven't been able to do fusion yet, but like if scientists hope that fusion will be done, but in the near future, but we need to. It takes years for all these fusion wind and solars. the world doesn't have that much time. It's like the dams, wind turbines, solar panels. That remark was about fossil fuel, fusion, but all the energy needs can be met using, and we all have to do our best to meet these needs. And we don't know how, we are not sure how long it's going to take for the climate to change. Like we see the forests have burned this year. We've seen how Turkey is becoming more arid and desert-like. We see how some sea creatures are creeping in through Aegean and the Mediterranean. Like there were some poisonous or whatever, like some exotic fish are creeping in into our seas as an indicator of global climate change. And this is something that we all had to take precautions against as humanity, and we don't know when the threshold is going to be crossed, and we know that it's increasing more and more. And unless the breaking point, it's like it's not something that we can do to return the world back to the natural order and stop using fossil fuels immediately. And how long do you think, even if they take this decision, how long do you think it will take to implement this? They should do it in a couple of years, but in order to do this, there is no power to compel this, like to enforce this. So like humanity is like, it's like my government's economic activities, factories, this, that, like some governments are not approaching these methods, and they are still not convinced. Even if we, Professor, even if we make this decision, how is it going to be implemented? Like all of the organization of life is based on these fossil fuels and so on. Because all of it is based on all of this, we need to replace all of them with renewable energies, and that's the only possible way. Today, we use vehicles that use oil, and all transportation revolves around that, right? And the supply chain are like through trucks and ships, and it's possible today to transform these into electric vehicles, and we can do it. And the sooner the better. Instead of using other energy forms, we can use electricity, and the electricity can be, as I said, what do they call it? Solar panels and wind turbines and other renewable sources. You can replace these forms of energy. Germans tried to shut down their nuclear reactors, and it happened a couple of years ago, as I remember. And they tried to go back to renewable energies. I don't know how much they've been able to do that. I haven't followed it through, but I've heard about it a couple of years ago. And so the Germans have tried doing that. And in the West, scientists are talking about these, but how effective are they? A government cannot do it alone. It's got to be done globally. If you don't, replace fossil fuels with electricity, and if you don't base that on renewable sources of energy like solar or wind or something else, our end is coming soon. It's nigh. It doesn't matter whether it's Turkish, Kurd, Arabic, or foreigners, or like French or British. It's all gonna be annihilated if something like this happens. And such a breaking point, if it's passed, and when a global climate crisis comes, our current technologies and our knowledge has no solution to such a crisis. There's nothing we can do about it. It's like we are so hopeless and powerless. So like in 15 or 20 years, there could be an apocalypse in the world. That's what I'm trying to say. And there's another thing. We, for example, produce a lot of waste.
Herkes bir kilo çöp
everyone
üretir.
produces 1
Günde 7
kilogram of
milyar kilo çöp eder.
trash,
7
7
milyar
billion
insan varsa
tons,
7-8 milyar.
7 billion tons
Siz
of
bunu 365 günde
trash every
çarpın. Bir
day.
yılda ne kadar çöp üretiyorsanız
Multiply that with
ölçün.
365,
Günde
and
50
you
seneyle
can
çarpın.
see how much
100
that
seneyle
means
çarpın.
in a
Trilyonlarca ton
well,
yapar.
you
O
multiply
kadar
that
büyük
with 10
rakamlar
years,
çıkıyor ki
100 years,
böyle
trillions of
efendim
tons
15-20
of
tonluk kamyonlar
waste. Like
hafta
these,
sonu bile
if you
yani
think
hafta
about
sonu
it,
bile
these like in
gitmek
terms of how many
zorunda
trucks it
kullanır ya
takes to
insanoğlu.
move them. Like
Böyle
since we
yani
don't,
bugün
we are not
kanalda
able to
yeni
imagine
kanalda
large
yeni
numbers.
kanalda yeni
So
kamyon
let's say
geçerek
it's like every
ne
truck is
kadar
like
çok
20
sayıda tren
tons.
olduğunu
Like you can
görüyorsunuz.
imagine how many
Binlerce kamyon
trucks
yapıyor.
it's going to
50
take,
yıl içinde.
and you see how it's going to
Tamam mı? Çöpler
cover the whole earth in a
tonlarca
short amount of, like
malzeme
in
yemiş olursunuz.
100 years.
Denizler
So if you dig it into the ground, you
yakarsan
poison the ground. If you put it in the ocean, you will pollute the and if you burn it, you pollute the air. You cannot recycle really, and how much of it can you recycle? That's another mystery. It doesn't matter if you do it 5% or 10%.
Kötü tarafı
The bad thing is that in the old ancient times, like these old in the old times, it's not organic. These are not things that go back to the soil.
Çin'in
It's not.
atasözü vardır derler ki,
The Chinese
çok
have
daha insan gübresinden yapılmaz.
a proverb says like the soil of China is made of human feces. So like because there are so many people, like it is made up of human feces. But like if you throw things like organic stuff, maybe you will have some plagues and some other infectious diseases if it's in a crowded area. But it will not lead to a global scale crisis. But today, our waste is poisonous waste. For example, this phone's battery and the cars and all the industrial a lot of the industrial production is waste products, toxic waste products, and if you dig it, it's dirty. It spoils the soil. If you put it in the oceans, the microplastics and the toxic waste and the radioactive waste is like it goes into the fish, and you eat it, and it changes your gene. It can even lead to mutations in the genes. In the genome, and we know that these waste, some toxic waste, can lead to that. And this waste that we have, the industrial age and the post-industrial age, it's not recyclable waste. It's toxic waste, and it doesn't have to be covered by waste. It's just so even in the orbit there are so many satellites. They sometimes they hit each other. In the orbit. Even the orbit around the Earth has become a waste with our activities. We think that we are so smart, but the things that we do, it's one thing to start an activity. It's one thing to engage in an activity, but we are not smart enough to calculate the consequences. The last one. Are we not smart enough, or are we just ignoring it knowingly? I will come to that. That's the problem. Is the problem is the state, the property. So we have been industrializing for the last 200 years. For the last, we are also industrializing in the late periods. So there are some countries that still don't have industrialization. Agriculture has started 10,000 years ago, and there are still some areas that haven't had agricultural revolution, and there are some people in the Amazon forest who live as hunter and gatherers, like nomadic people. So we started 200 years ago, 250 years ago, but there are still many countries who haven't industrialized. Not all the world has become industrialized, but even despite this, because of the spread of this industrialization, we don't know the problems that it creates. Industrialization and capitalism brought the nation states. There used to be empires in the past. There were other ideologies. There was another mentality in human, like there was another worldview, and the soil was in the feudal ages was the source of richness. But industrial revolution has changed a lot of things, and one of the things that it has changed is some side effects. So this, as a result of this richness, there are some disasters that it creates. So, for example, we start with a steam engine with coal, but it uses fossil fuels, as you know.
bunun dünyaya ödettiği bir iklim
But
bedeli var.
what is the
Ülkelerin talip olduğu
cost that
böyle
the world pays in terms of like the climate, the pollution, the ocean, the waters, the soil, the air?
Suyu, havayı, toprağı.
zehirlenmesi gibi bir bedeli var.
So this is the cost of this
Ziraat
industrialization.
bedeli
This,
mesela
agriculture's cost was the deforestation. It has led to a great loss of forests. So I don't want to go into the details of that. I'm going to say these things shortly because every one of them
bitmez böyle.
requires a lot of details, and it won't be enough. So these, altering these ecologic balances and driving them to extinction, and so the world is kind of like a living organism, even if you're not aware of it. Yes, it's loosely connected, but the system is connected to each other. This habitat is being poisoned by us, and we are destroying it. We are poisoning and destroying the environment that we live in, the air, the water, the things that we produce from the soil, and the GMO, as you know, like the air, up to everything, as much as like to the things that we produce, to consume. So there's this problem. So what is the cause of this? This cannot be done with industry. Do you really have to, like, you cannot send these things to the space, this waste, in such great volumes, so it has to stay on Earth. It's doomed to stay on Earth, and it's going to poison the world. In the next 10, 50 years or 100 years, the ecology, it's enough to destroy the ecology, even if there is no climate change. So on top of that, we have the AI problem, right? So like the AI is also a great problem. So there was a physicist called Stephen Hawking. He died, if you remember. So it was Hawking's warning that there's also Elon Musk. There are also some other smart people who talk about it, like artificial intelligence. Many enlightened, many educated, like intellectuals talk about that. It's going to be the one of the biggest problems of humanity. So at one time in the past, I wrote about robots. I wrote about robots and slaves. In the ancient times, in agricultural times, in ancient Greece, the slaves used to work. It was a slave society, and after the American Civil War, slavery was abolished, as you know. So these are the needs of the ancient agricultural society. So the ancient Greece, there are the slaves do everything, and these nobles engage in philosophical arguments, and they do some gyms and so on. This, of course, oppression, but if we can make robots that are similar to humans, like for example, if you can make a robot that can do agriculture, like that can work as an agricultural worker, or for things that are difficult for humans to do, or heavy labor, unnecessary but obligatory activities of humans. If we can replace those activities with robots, if we could make those kind of robots as slaves, if we can make them work, they will work, and we will eat, we will consume. So they say such dreamy visions, and like that there's Sophia and other similar human-like human-like robots, and their faces and their hands look like human, but they are very primitive. AI is very primitive too. The current AI is very primitive. It's just doing statistical analysis. There is some machine learning, deep learning, but these are still algorithms. Doesn't have consciousness, and it's not so easy to give consciousness to AI as AI scientists wish, because consciousness means to live, and so you can hear me because you're alive. I speak and you listen to me, but if you hadn't had life, if you didn't have, and so you wouldn't be able to understand what I would be saying, what I'm saying now. So this conversation is now taken through YouTube to many different places over the world now, like to Istanbul, to Ankara, whatever. This is the work of AI. Yes, it's good, but this computer and this YouTube algorithms software, this AI, this AI is not cannot see that I'm speaking here, and not just in Turkish law, but maybe all people may consider criminal. Like there's this man who speaks about such things that can be considered criminal by everyone, perhaps all states. Is this AI aware that I'm saying such things? Because this AI is not alive, it doesn't have consciousness. Because it doesn't have consciousness, it doesn't understand what it does. It does it, but this transfers this video, but it's not aware of what it's doing. It doesn't have awareness. In order to have awareness, it's got to be alive. Is this possible? On the possibility of this, there can be some long discussions on the possibility of this. But we don't have we don't have just 3 or 5 problems. We have a lot of problems in today's world. So I will not go into all of the details. But even today's AI rules a lot of the things. So let's say that we've made a humanoid robot and we connected it to the internet. Let's imagine that we've made a robot. The ones that we have is not very practical. Yeah, I want to have an assistant robot in my house. So for example, open Anna Karenina''s or War and Peace. The scene from the eye of the wolf, like open War and Peace. I want to see that, and it should open it right away without losing any time. So there should be a robot. Like, yeah, I mean, if it's connected to internet, it can do that. A computer can do that too. So it has got to understand speech. That's all. At home, I can make some onion and make a salad, and a chef can do that too, and it can, but a chef can do it much faster, as you know. Like the hand skills of a chef is much better. Dexterity, right? I don't have the dexterity. Yeah, they make these prosthetics in hands and arms. They are very advanced now, but it doesn't even have as much hand skills as a human. So a humanoid robot cannot cook a meal for you, but it's going to be soon. It's going to be soon. So it cannot be your personal doctor as a, like a caretaker. But what does it need to be able to do this? It's got to be connected to the internet. It's got to have some kind of cloud connection. It's got to have. When I wrote about these things, even internet hadn't existed, public. I wasn't able to imagine these things at that time, but now I can. If you connect the robot to the internet, you will have a very big crisis, because a single robot will not be a single single robot. It will be connected to an AI that's connected to the whole world network. It's going to be a being that's going to be so much more powerful than humanity itself, because it's going to be connected to the internet. If you don't connect it to the internet, let's just use it as a slave, it will be very limited, and you cannot do it either, because it's going to be so limited. So that's a big problem. So AI is developing, robots are developing. A single robot is not going to be a single robot when it's connected to the internet. So 100 million or 500 million robot army. It's going to be act like a robot army. You're going to see it like one person, because it looks like a human, but it's going to be connected with the whole AI due to the internet. So if it's like a humanoid robot, and if you allow it to connect to the internet, and if you don't allow it to connect to the internet, it's not going to be very useful. And if you allow it to connect to the internet, then it's going to be connected to AI, and if AI develops a little bit more, it's going to be the greatest enemy, arch enemy, because AI can destroy the whole of humanity. Today, the human population is reaching, nearing 10 billion. The world is not capable of handling 10 billion, or you need to reduce it to 1 billion or something. And you cannot reduce it to that by pandemics or wars. Pandemics. So you can limit to one child, and you can have some kind of castration after 2 children or something like that. But even then, you have to wait for 50, 100 years for the world population to decrease. So human population needs to decrease because the increase of this human population leads to the ecological imbalances because of this production and the consumption, and because of the cost of this production. Even if it's an agricultural society. Look, National Geographic, there was this Winchester rifle, and there are some agricultures, like they burn the forest, and they if the land is not fertile anymore, they burn another area. Farmers burn forests for agriculture. Like the hunter-gatherer says, you're the one who are, like you're destroying my habitat. Like you're killing me because I live here. So, and they wait. This local tribe waits with a Winchester rifle to kill this farmer who is destroying their habitat. So there was a picture like this 40 years ago in National Geographic. So agriculture, even compared to industry, is like not toxic. It's like organic waste, and it's not so harmful and so on. But like a lot of ecological balances have been broken. A lot of animals have been driven into extinction because of agriculture. Agriculture is harmful too. So what needs to, like a human needs to live as a hunter-gatherer, like other animals.
Ben kapatayım mikrofonu.
Evet. Yani insan iki kollu, iki bacaklı, bildiğin bir pek de öyle güçlü olmayan bir canlı çeşidi.
So it's like a two-legged.
Her neyse. İşte bak, teknolojiyi de kullanamıyorsunuz.
It's a two-legged, not so powerful animal, right?
Bu insan
this human by being able to use the thumb, which allows us to hold and grasp objects, and the ability to stand on 2 feet, and the ability to use weapons, tools, because of this is much more advantaged over all the other animals, because it can use its hands and making weapons and tools. It has become over time stronger than other animals. But regardless of that, the hunter-gatherer is a more natural human, and that's the nature of human is more suitable for that rather than for agriculture. But without agriculture, you wouldn't have civilization. Large populations couldn't come together. They couldn't collaborate and like do science and make a lot of advances. We wouldn't have been able to see any of these advances. So this civilization and all of its institutions and this high intelligence of humans and the high skills, like and tool using and so on, and after agriculture and industrialism and capitalism and like the industrial revolution has come, and after that it has increased this progresses, like the world is revolving faster. Every day we are producing more information, and this information is, a lot of it is waste, yes, and most humans are just conveyors. They just convey information. For example, philosophers just talk about the history, or scientists say according to certain paradigms and so on. But like the great philosophers and scientists and artists are rare in human history, but as a result, the accumulation, the accumulation of knowledge is a lot, and there are 200 countries in the world. All of them have universities, and all these doctors and scientists that work in these universities. It's like they are much more than most of the humans have existed in the past.
Her gün daha fazla teknolojide ve bilgi artışında daha fazla ve daha hızlanan bir değişmeye sebep oluyor. Şahin
So it
oluyor.
leads to change, increasing velocity of change, the increasing speed of change
Hızla değişmesine sebep oluyor.
because of this research and all that, and production of information. So I went to Halep, Aleppo,
Halep'te
and
Halep'in ana
you can find it on the internet perhaps. So I was on the main street of Aleppo, and I've seen 3-4 meters and 2 kilometers long, like 2-3 meters tall and 2 kilometers long trash in the middle of the main street.
93, 94
I'm talking about like the years 93 and 94 or something. Like I went there again another time. It's not such a long time ago.
çöp felaketi.
So the waste, I've seen the waste with my own eyes. If it's not collected in the middle of the streets, like like a mountain for
Yapay zeka
kilometers,
felaketini de
and this AI,
biz henüz farkında
we haven't realized it yet. But when I went to United States, there
Ergeç Bey vardı rahmetli, onun çocukları
they
falan
so
PC'ler yeni
it's
çıktı.
like the PCs were just coming up,
Yeni başladı.
and the PC revolution had just started. And what is a child going to do? So like I bought my first PC in '93. It was like 64K. Its memory was 64K. It had DOS and BASIC. And the hard disk hadn't been invented yet. Like they were like floppy disks.
Benim bilgisayar
And my computer used a cassette tape. So imagine how bad it was, how primitive it was. So from the time of the old punched cards till today, so all of this until today, all of this is software is. Since ENIAC, we have been using algorithms. We've been dealing with algorithms since ENIAC.
delikli kartlardaki algoritmalar da dahil.
And the punch card algorithms and all these algorithms do a certain job. They're like designed to do a certain job, and all of this is AI in some sense.
Zekayı kullanıyoruz.
We've been using AI, but it has improved a lot in the last years, in the last times, recently. And
En fazla 10 yıl içinde insan zekasını kat
and
mesafe
AI is going to surpass
tahminleri yapılıyor.
humankind by a lot,
Yapay zekanın
as they predict.
hayatın bütün alanlarına bugün gördüğümüzden 10 kat, 20 kat, 100 kat daha fazla yayılacağı açık.
So this is going to spread 10 times or 100 times more. This is going to spread a lot.
Beraber gelişiyor ve robotların her biri bir yapay zeka
And
olacaktır. Yani karşınızda bütün yapay zekayı
all
temsil
this
edecek bir robot demek.
this robot is going to represent all of AI
Yani
when it
böyle bir robot
stands.
bir farz. Ne vardı o Terminator filmleri?
So in Terminator movies, for example, you made a robot and all the AI is loaded onto it because it's connected to the internet. It can use all of the AI, and with this Terminator, you cannot do anything, even if it's a single robot, right?
Yani insanlar bunun farkında
And
değil.
humans are not aware of this
Günlük hayata yansımadı.
because it hasn't come into our daily life yet. It's very dangerous, and because it can say that this whole human race is very it's like there are too many of you and you're stupid and you're destroying the climate and the world. It is obvious that it's going to destroy humanity, at least the majority of humanity,
Şey yapsa bile.
judging in this way.
Bir de yapay zeka tehditleri
So there's a problem of AI that's waiting for us.
var.
So there are global threats waiting for us. The climate change is at the door. The ecological, balance has been long lost. Countless forests and animals have disappeared. BBC has a documentary. Oceans are already overly polluted with the plastics, microplastics, etc. Our atmosphere is already polluted because of the carbon dioxide. It's like it's to the level where it's polluting. There are some cities that are
İklim felaketi gibi.
overly polluted, etc. So whatever. So this, climate and the waste, the accumulation of the waste,
Ve yapay zeka
and because of
gibi
AI,
tehditlerle karşı karşıyayız.
we face such threats, and all of these are global problems.
Yani biz devlet kendi içinde bu problemlerin hepsini
A
çözmüş.
government has solved all of the problems in itself locally. Let's imagine that it has done so, and if it's but it's not enough. Its local solutions are not enough. But Turkey's, like, it's going to affect the whole world. If Turkey's climate is good, like, it's not possible for Turkey's climate is good and the rest of it to be good. It's not possible, right? So even if I bought this PC in '93, we bought these phones when. Like, how many phones do you have in your pockets? Like, every year you're buying the new model, whether they have the money or not. So you may not develop it. Maybe your country will not follow these large changes that are happening globally. Your people, your intellectuals, whatever, like, may ignore these changes. You may. But these things are happening in the world, and when this happens in the world, you are forced to buy this. So, for example, I had to buy this computer. When I saw that this computer doesn't work well, I bought myself a Macintosh. So, like, the other one is laying idle on the. Well, like, I had to buy this phone. So these necessities of life. And to adapt, it's like leads you to buy these things. 5G is coming in telecommunications, for example. It's very dangerous, actually. It's going to cover all around with radiation, and it's going to enslave all humanity. In China, it's like using smart cameras. They follow every activities, or all the activities of everyone. If you pass across the street, they reduce your scores by 1. For example, if you jaywalk, if you do jaywalking, if you cross the street at red lights, so it increases or decreases your credit score, social credit score, and it can do it because they don't have the same kind of freedom that we have. They prefer security instead of freedom. So let it be safe. We will give up our freedoms, they say. Let our private life not exist, but let there be no crime or some other problems. And so it should become comfortable, convenient. So for whatever reason, as a result, we are led to buy this technology, or even if you don't develop it yourself, you will have to buy it. These phones, these computers, just like you bought these phones and computers. And as a result, you will have to live in the same way with the rest of the world. Even if you try to isolate yourself, it's not possible. The conditions that that the world is in cannot be isolated from our country. Like, our country cannot be isolated from the world. Like, you cannot go and live in the mountain, for example. Like, it's not possible. So these big problems, how are you going to solve this problem? If you cannot do it in a local governments, national governments, or we are tired of the dictatorship of the national governments or something like that. Shall we do it in a global government? So yes, it's necessary for cooperation to have national states. Yes, it's for safety, for this and for that, and most of all, property. It starts with agriculture. The conflicts between humans existed in hunter-gatherer ages too, but at that time you didn't have governments and states, and even today there are a lot of societies without states. Our Turks and Muslims live in such a world that they cannot even imagine that societies can exist without states. So there was a book that said human societies cannot live without states. The number of societies that live without states are at least 10 times more than the number of states. Yes, there are not many people, like 10 or 20, 10 or 100 people. Like, if there's no state, the population is going to be But I'm going to say something. Well, without agriculture, it cannot be a state. But I'll say something more interesting. Economists know about this. In the feudal ages,
Bütün servetin kaynağı topraktır.
the richness came from the soil, from the land. Land cannot
Ama
be,
siz toprağı yok edemezsiniz.
but you cannot destroy the soil, right? Destroy the land. But capital, along with the increase of the importance of capital, this absolute property, the understanding of absolute property has come with capitalism. Okay, well, let there be capitalism, like this private property. Let there be AI. Okay, there's Google. All of the information everything that I'm saying right now, everything that we say goes to Google, right? Whatever anyone is doing, they follow everything. They just they're surveilling, and just like in 1984, it's like not much more different than the 1984. This Big Brother is watching us all. Who is this? Google. Who is this? It's a private company. So there's got to be, it's like a monopoly, some antitrust laws and so on. In the United States, they're talking about these antitrust laws and so on. But how can you do this? Like, it's the AI is under the monopoly of Google or Facebook or Amazon. And so how can you this? Some have such so much money that it's more than governments. Some states, some Rockefellers, Rothschilds, the secret owners of the world, the partners of Fed or whatever. Their wealth is not even known. So these pharmaceutical companies, and these are the biggest companies in the world, and no government can deal with them. A big agricultural food company, a big food corporation. Like, all the governments are now poisoning their own people by helping these big food companies. When I go to the food store, I buy these GMO. I have to buy these GMO because the governments are pushing it. Because the governments are not able to deal with these big food companies, and the oil companies are like that too, and the weapons dealers are also like that. Like, this AI companies are like that too. These are very big companies. Can we? Did we do something? Do we do something smart by allowing them absolute property? They are going to enslave us. Even now, we are enslaved. Like Gustav, someone said it in 1900s in a new approach to philosophy of history. He said, in one world, all people give each other tax, but they don't realize it. Yes, everyone takes, someone makes it and you take it. Yes, all right, but in this modern state model and this property model, there are some things about it that it's the bane of society. It's the problem of society. It's the the owner of, in the times when property was owned by a family or a tribe, it was useful. In the feudal ages, it was useful. Feudal ages was a better system, 10 times better than capitalism. Feudalism was consistent. In Wilhelm Röpke talks about it in a book. Feudalism is much better than feudalism. Capitalism and communism are both awful systems. We don't know what to do now. We have destroyed the feudal system and we brought on capitalism, but did we do something right? The demise of our age, or the problem of our age, or the crisis of our age. Yeah, Kenneth Building in his book called The Meaning of the 20th Century. We have to go beyond the civilization, an age beyond civilization. So we have these property and this international. If we give this property rights to international companies, they will just consider their own profits and revenues. They will not care about the poisoning or the deforestation or the human's health or anything, or the climate change, the oil, fossil fuel, or the weapons production and its consequences. They will not care about any of these things.
Her neyse, yani netice olarak büyük şirketlerin elinde çok büyük uluslararası monopollerin,
these international monopolies,
yükleyecek mutlak mülkiyet hakkını
This,
tanırsanız
if you
bunlara,
give them the absolute
demek
property
dünyanın
rights,
sonunu bunlar
this
getirecek.
they will bring about the end of the world. Whether
Ya
it's the
Türkiye'de
pollution of the
biliyorsunuz değil mi?
air
Evet,
doesn't matter for them. So like like there's these factories who produce air pollution.
kömür renginde akıyor.
The rivers are flowing dark. It's so black, and they are complaining about it.
İşte o maruz kalan insanlar,
They are
kimsenin
being
o
poisoned. They care about it, but nobody cares.
Yani
Mm,
adam karını düşünür. Büyük
Uh,
şirketlerde dünya çapında.
and
Aynı-
it
aynı
reduces
gibi.
their revenues. So that's what they do. Like it's, and big companies do the same in global scale. They just go through the forest and with these, they just cut it like grass. The forests, right? So like 70% of the rainforests are gone already. Like the lungs of the world are gone already. So like it doesn't matter for them if it's a global scale or not. So like, what right do you have to destroy these? So Brazil says it's ours. So you cannot deal. You cannot.
Dünyanın iklimini bozuyor.
Um,
Yani insan dünyanın oksijenlerini yok ediyorsun.
so you're destroying the lungs of the world. In Indonesia, they haven't left any forests. BBC has some. I've seen some documentaries about it on BBC. I've seen their documentaries. There are no forests there. They have some huge tools that just cut it like grass, like the harvest machines. It's like they just cut these forests. They just go in one side and go out from the other side. There's such a devastating level of destruction. So if you give these absolute rights of property to these international companies, you cannot deal with them as a single government. So what can you do? Let's say that the United Nations, you've declared it one government. So Mr. Tayyip says the world is larger than five. He says, for example, there are five countries, and UN cannot do anything without these five countries, because they have the right to veto. So there's this United Nations have created this United Nations, this very respectable Ian Smuts have established this United Nations. He was the first and foremost of the who helped found this United Nations. First, they've established League of Nations, and they've made it a problem for us to deal with these passports. They've created these passports and so on. But the widespread use of these passports was because of Ian Smuts and the League of Nations. And after that, like with the they've established United Nations, and you see what the United Nations is good for now. It's not good for much. So Turkey is comparatively small. It's not so small, but compared to United States, it's small. Compared to China or Russia, it's small. Whether it's about the population or about territory. There are some smaller countries too. There are some tiny country with a tiny dictator, and people are not able to deal with them, right? Like there used to be Saddam, for example, in Iraq. There are other countries with other dictators, some Arabian sheikhs and whatever. Some stupid dictator has taken control of a country, and they all have to obey this dictator because they have the soldiers and the judges and the trial, like courts, and they either put them in prisons, or they execute them if they want. They punish them. So what right does a society or a government have the right to punish a person? So laws protect property. Laws protect property, and this property. What if this property threatens the whole life and the whole world? So why do you give the Google and Gibble or Bill Gates or whatever the right to monopolize Pfizer? Why do you give this absolute property right? With what kind of logic do you give them? Don't you see that this is harmful? The politicians, don't they see it? Well, humans are stupid. Anyway, even the intellectuals and the politicians are even more stupid. So even when all of them come together, they are stupid too. So this is stupidity. So the institution of the institution of government, like state, is also stupid in any form. because of all of the limitations that it brings to humanity.
Uluslararası
These
şirketlerin
states are working for the benefits for the good of the international companies, not for their own work. They work for the international companies, knowingly or not knowingly, deliberately or indeliberately, willingly or not willingly, either because of weapons, pharmacy, food, or some other, like. So they instead of protecting their own people and they work for the absolute property rights of these international corporations, and they don't do anything much else. And as a result, this institution of state is today harmful, and well, it's such an anarchist me. It's like if I cannot, if I cannot endure a small government, like should we have then a global government that's going to be even more oppressive? So the solution cannot be announcing UN as a world government, like even if you can imagine that such a thing could have been done. So let's imagine that we have destroyed all the other governments, and UN is going to be the global government. You can make some global decisions on a global scale for global climate change or AI or some ecologic balance or something else. But these global decisions is going to be dubious whether it's going to be applied in localities, and it's not clear whether it's going to help people. The people's problems are individual. The group's problems are belong to that group, and and it's local, right? We cannot ignore these things. If we ignore these things and solve the main problems, like let's find a solution for the state, for the property. Property can never be accepted. So not because I'm a Marxist or a leftist. The time of Marx has passed long ago, right? I'm not saying it's because of that. So the classes, the proletariat and all that, the workers, etc. It was something like that. It was influential for some time. These are old, obsolete ideas with no relevance to today's world. But the international monopolies, this global, this corporatocracy in this age of global companies, this global trade, property is not something acceptable, because this property is working against humans, and states serve this property, and because of that, the governments are, the states are illegitimate. They poison their own people because for protecting the benefits and the profits of some international food companies. So a government who makes laws for the benefit of these food companies, agriculture companies, big food companies, where is your legitimacy? Can I not ask that this is like? Can I not ask where the legitimacy of such a state comes from? There are countless arguments that we can develop, but I want to present this to make it simple and understandable. The most striking one. So the states that market their own population to international companies, that market their own, they sell its own people. So I've published this 5 volumes of democracy, even because they asked me a lot, and so I've I've scribbled some stuff. It's not like what you know. The institution of state has become obsolete. It doesn't matter if it's dictatorship, anarchy, democracy, or whatever it is, socialism or something. It's not able to come into sync with the modern problems and issues, because these require global issues. This international company, this pharmaceutical company, deals in internationals, but you don't. You are local. And so Pfizer, what does Pfizer do? Some RNA or mRNA or whatever, like some Turkish scientists did it in Germany, like I've learned about it. This it's Pfizer's property, it's Pfizer's right. If you buy it from Pfizer, you can use it. But people are dying. I don't care, I've done it. I want the money for it, it says, right? I don't give it for free.
Senin de gücün yetmiyor.
and you can't take it. You're not capable of doing that. Germany cannot force it. United States cannot force it. It's beyond the governments because it's an international company. Did I make it clear? So this international company, this Apple, is an American company, but it's produced in China, right? Its factories in China. If the government, because it doesn't want to pay a lot of tax, the American government doesn't want to pay a lot of money to the workers. They open their factories in Thailand and China. You say Sony, but Sony is a Japanese company, but some of their factories are in Germany, some of them in other parts, other places. They have a lot of, like these car companies. They are produced also in Turkey as well. They have they license it and sell it, like Toyota and other companies, Fiat, etc., Renault. But today, the borders, this property. For example, I'm not talking about like a house or like a car or a carpet or a watch. I'm not talking about this property. I'm talking about international, global property. That the government is protecting this global international property. This global property itself is theft only. This global property itself is illegitimate. Whether it's about its activities or about other aspects. We cannot discuss all of them, but what we can say is that the governments, the states, don't have legitimacy anymore. So how can we do it? How can we get rid of the states? So I'm a citizen of a tiny state, and if I cannot deal with that state, like let's say that I live in Saudi Arabia or some other country or whatever, if I can't deal with this sheikh or whatever, or if a small country cannot escape the oppression of that small state, what would we do if we had a global state? How would we be able to escape its oppression? All of humanity would have become slaves. It wouldn't have any human characteristics. Today's humanity is enslaved. It's living under a state of slavery that it's not aware of. It works a lot and it pays taxes. Why does it take taxes? So there are central banks. They print paper. They just write on paper like how much money it is. So distributes that money, and it's like it causes inflation, devaluation, this and that, and as a result, they acquire tax using this money and steal from the people. So the states take this toll using the currencies that it prints. So there's a dollar hegemony, right? The hegemony of dollar. It used to be gold or silver or some other valuable metals. They had some kind of a solidity. They couldn't be replicated. They were not fiat money. They couldn't be. The people could not be easily fooled with the printing of money. So yes, there were some deflation of money in the Ottoman Empire. Yeah, there are different things. We are not going to go into the details, but as in the final score, money is the foundation of a state, the central bank. This central bank does this. Whenever it wants, it prints money. And it distributes it, and because people have to use it within my borders, my money is valid. So today dollar is like what, 10 liras, right? And you cannot even protect its value. Yes, so it used to be 1 lira, today it's like 10 liras. So this difference comes from the pockets of the people's pockets, and some of it goes to the Fed. So in this way or that way, by hook or by crook, all of the world loses money, and the dollar's patrons, the euro's patrons, make money. They profit. China should have created its own money, but European Union has created its own money, the euro, to compete with the dollars, but it doesn't work. What happened after the Second World War, the Brexit, etc. It's a long topic. We cannot go into that. But finally, what I would like to say is the oppression of the state state's oppression of people, the first and foremost reason for this is money. So it can pillage and plunder and do everything, but it's not just your own state, but the finance capital. It serves the finance capital, right? They get most of the money, and they get the real profits. So the Turkish people are the slaves of the Turkish state, but the Turkish state works like the slave of the Fed. So the central bank independence, etc. Why is the American central bank is not independent of the why is it not independent of the central bank? So there's a single tax system by Henry George, right, in economics. 100 years, it's like 100 years ago. So I got some economic theories of my own too. Henry George was an American billionaire, millionaire or something, like wealthy American. We have come to the end of our time in the meantime. So this problem of the property, just like the single tax, so let it be taken from the land. Nobody's going to be able to own the property. But today, let alone land or movable capital, we are living in the virtual capital. He makes dandy Facebook application. He's become one of the richest people in the world. So like you don't have to, it's not like Microsoft Windows or something like that. Just a university student can write it down, and that's exactly when he wrote it. So like he became the richest people in the world. So this is not a deserved, without no effort, with virtually no effort, but like in a virtual world, in a virtual so you got he has acquired, like they acquired such powers that are beyond the powers of the national states. This world cannot be accepted. This agricultural legacy, this what's left from the ancient times, this legal norms based on those ancient obsolete states cannot also be accepted. So neither property nor states themselves. So poor people who cannot deal with local national states, what can they do with the global governments? So if a national government is unacceptable, what is the answer? So what can they do against the global government? And that requires what can be done then? Well, that requires a long discussion. But let me say shortly that most human problems, and the governance problem and the money problem, for example, we can turn it into crypto money. There's this much wealth in the world, there is a population, we divide it equally into the population, and we divide it equally over the population, and it's like no governments can meddle with it, interfere with it. Like they can, if they want, they can do something like this, but people cannot apply this, and even if governments want it, it cannot be applied. It can create its own cryptocurrency. There are some countries, San Salvador or something like that, in China, but it's not something that a government can do. It requires global collaboration, but humans cannot do global collaboration. Humans are not suitable for politics. They are selfish and immoral and ambitious. When they want to do it, when they want to do politics, they want to do it for wealth, or for their power, wish for power, or for it's not particular to a person. It's related to the human nature. Human is not capable of, doesn't have the moral capacity to do politics. It cannot do it objectively. If it can, it's only possible for AI, if it can do it.
getireceği belalardan bahsediyor.
But we've just been talking about the problems that AI could create, and to limit AI and to solve the property and the management and the governance. How can we limit AI and let it handle all these problems? It's only possible through AI,
Hocam
but
süremizin
how can we?
sınırlarını aştık.
We have went beyond the time limits.
Bayağı önemli şeyler de söyledik.
You have
Sanıyorum
we have said a lot of important things.
süreyi bayağı
Yeah,
götüreceğiz.
we will. If we open something else, we open a discussion. We will go well beyond our time. So we'll genetic weapons, chemical weapons, nuclear weapons. There are so many problems today.
Bütün insanlık çapında olan. Ben sadece bir kısmına temas
I've just mentioned some of
O
them.
problemlerin de tek tek fertlerin, düşünürlerin, politikacıların veya devletlerin
Are not able, cannot be resolved by individually people, societies, or governments, or like politicians. Cannot be, and most of them are like not even understood by the intellectuals, and
dünya çapında bir problem.
so this is a global scale problem, and only global precautions and solutions can handle these kind of problems. But it is beyond the power of humanity. That's why I think that we need to go into the
Hocam çok
AI.
teşekkür ediyorum.
The subject of AI is
Ağzınıza,
beyond
yüreğinize
humanity.
sağlık.
Thank you
Bugün birkaç
for your
spot
words, for
halinde
your
özetlemeye
yeah. Let's
vurgulamak
try to.
istiyorum
I want to
Bir,
summarize in a couple of notes.
Küresel çapta sorunlar
articles.
yaşıyoruz. Çok büyük
So we
sorunlar.
have
Bunları bir
huge
yerde
global
çözmeleri mümkün değil.
problems, but local solutions are not
İki,
possible. Number two,
dünyaya dair ürettiğimiz bütün çözüm diye ürettiğimiz mekanizmalar, oluşturduğumuz
all the
organizasyonlar,
solutions, organizations,
hatta düşünme
all the
biçimimiz, ilişki
ways of
biçimimiz
thinking and
vesaire,
communication and all that we
şu
have
an
come
bizi
to deal with such
bizden
problems
dönük bir tehdit oluşturuyor. Bunun altını
face,
çizmemiz lazım.
cause a threat to us. They
Dolayısıyla
all
da
cause a
bir
threat to us,
anlamda
and
geçmiş ve
therefore
geleceğe ilişkin büyük risklerin bizi beklediği
there are huge
kritik
risks
bir
waiting waiting for us in the future. We are in the threshold of time. Whether if we don't find a solution for this in 10-15 years, it will be an apocalypse. Yes.
Bu vaziyette bitirmiş olalım. Hocam çok teşekkür
Yeah.
ediyorum.
Thank you,
Katkılarınız,
Professor. Thank you for your contributions.
İnşallah önümüzdeki Kasım ayının son pazartesi
And
günü
hopefully next
Şahin
month,
Hoca'yla tekrar
in the last,
birlikte
in November,
olacağız.
in the last
Bizi izleyen,
Sunday, we'll be
dinleyen,
together
eşlik
again.
eden bütün dostlarımıza çok
Thank you
teşekkür
all
bu
who's
sohbete katkıları,
watching and listening to us,
refakatleri
and
için.
for their
Bir sonraki
accompaniment, for
programda
their
görüşmek üzere.
well.
Herkese
See you in
hayırlı
the next
akşamlar.
program. Have a good evening.